Hey, it's Glenn from Psychic Celluloid Signals. I'm here with Josh and Nate, and we are here to talk about
Mother.
Again.
And this time... Oh, I didn't like it. Yes, Nate saw it, he didn't like it. So we figured we're going to make another video, and it's going to be kind of on opposing viewpoints, some of the things we agreed on, some things we disagreed on, maybe more things that we've kind of thought of since seeing the movie.
Ruminations.
Yeah, so, and just a quick heads up, this is going to be a spoilers video, so if you don't want to have this spoiled for you, definitely check the movie out first before watching this review. So we're going to go through and, oh yeah, that is sitting there.
No, just leave it as a mystery.
Just leave it as a mystery.
If you don't know the reference, if you don't get it, Google it.
Just
stop
look
the
up,
video.
just look
We'll still be here. Stop it. Look it up.
Just look up the album. So there's our mystery. Because we're going the route to be as confusing as Mother. So, alright, there we go. So we're going to start out, we're just going to go through a bunch of different aspects of the film, and we're going to start off with casting. What do you guys think about the casting in this movie? I'll go to Nate first.
Overall, I thought the casting was pretty good. I definitely had some issues more with how the characters were written. I mean, I thought the actors themselves and actresses did very well. Maybe some issues with how Jennifer Lawrence's dynamic was. It seemed like it was either, in my opinion, it seemed like it was either Kristen Stewart level delivery, like just very deadpan and kind of sullen, or she was screaming Leonardo DiCaprio style. So it was like two extremes in my opinion. There wasn't a lot of middle ground. And I know I've seen her act very well in other films, so it was just kind of shocking. Not to say that she did a terrible job, just not a lot of range, I guess, in my opinion. But Javier Bardem, I thought, played a very convincing God, I guess. He played God in a very negative way, just kind of like dumb and into himself, very selfish at times. The other characters, actually Eve was probably, the woman that portrayed Eve was kind of interesting, very like it was kind of like a mixture between Eve and the serpent in my opinion, because she was also very like deceitful and like kind of played on Mother Nature. Well, Jennifer Lawrence's character played on her insecurities.
I definitely agree with you most everywhere. I thought the casting was pretty good for the most part. I agree with you as well with Jennifer Lawrence. I felt that there definitely could have been like a middle ground, and I know that there was some kind of like talk of people defending her kind of non-expression in the film as being like, well, she's Mother Earth and all this stuff.
What I would argue. Also, I would argue the scenes that she's in, the situation she's in, don't necessarily lend herself to, she's got a very domineering husband, who, he's just domineering, and he's very loud, and he doesn't give her a word in edgewise.
And you make, not to interrupt you, Glenn, but you make a very good point that I was going to bring up eventually, that this movie had definitely some feminist undertones to it, where the whole movie, Mother Nature, is basically, literally and figuratively, just pushed around, kicked around, and taken advantage of. And I think it was trying to basically just portray, like, men's treatment of women throughout history, I suppose. Like, the movie was trying to it had a lot of messages
but
to
it's the woman who brings life into the world. It's like she's the, you know, my brain just short circuited.
I'd say I personally felt on the fence about her delivery, or at least how, I don't know if it was like her delivery or if it was how she was directed to deliver her line or her expressions and whatnot. So on one hand, I definitely get the one side, on the other hand, I get the other side. I don't know if there could have been a approach where she could have been more emotive, but yet still kind of had that whole dynamic with Javier Bardem's character and with all the other characters that show up. So it's hard to say for me. It does make her character like maybe not as likable as you feel she could have been, or as relatable, or really even as
I don't know about you guys, but it's not so much that she was like a one-note character. It was like two ends of the pendulum. Like there wasn't a lot of gray area in my opinion. It was either like just very quiet or like the scene. I mean, I know we're jumping ahead to the end of the movie, but there were two scenes where you really get like an emotional response from her. Actually, three. There's the one where it's a symbol for the flood, where the pipes break, and she's like, "Everybody get out now!" And then there's the scene where she gives birth to her baby, and Javier Bardem's like, "Let me hold him. He is my son." And she's like, "No, back away." And he's just like, "Oh man." And then there's the final scene where the people are eating the baby, which we'll get into that later. And she's just like, "You killed my baby!" It's like stabbing them in the throat and shit.
In fairness, I think that's part of her character. Like, she seems to be very much a character of like the scenes you've mentioned were at the very end of the film where she's like pushed to the edge. I think mostly she seems like she's a very fragile character. She's obviously been like pushed around by her husband, so I'd expect her to be either one extreme or the other. I wouldn't expect her to be middle ground because she's not in a situation that would allow her to be like just kind of.
I guess I can see what you're saying. Like, to complement what you're saying, Mother Nature it's kind of like how the weather is, like Mother Nature or the weather. Like the weather can either be very calm and peaceful, or it can be like a turbulent storm. So it's kind of, I mean, for me that draws up a new issue, but I do understand what you're saying, like, as far as her
she's also
acting.
definitely, I feel like, an introverted character, and an artist.
Yeah.
Private, so.
I guess the one thing I could say is that I definitely agree her actions, for sure, were very, like, either one end of the extreme or the other, and that makes sense for the character, and that's how it should have been. Although, maybe, like personal expression-wise, like facial emotions and stuff like that could have been a little bit more varied, just because.
How much would have, not to interrupt, but how much, like, she's not much a character like as a human character. She's Mother Earth, Mother Nature.
Right.
So how much it's kind of like God. Like, how much of a do we put on God or like Mother Nature as like these entities? We don't know them. Everyone has a different idea of how they are.
Right.
So like, how much personality do we want to give them?
Right.
I guess that's my problem too, is I don't know if you would agree, Josh and Glenn. The characters, it's like they want to be their own characters, but they also need to play there also needs to be symbolism too. So it's like, it's kind of just like this tug of war where Javier Bardem's a writer, but he's also God. So he has to fit the role of being God, but he also has to be a husband and a writer, a struggling writer who's living in the middle of nowhere. And it's like the movie wants these characters to have, I guess they don't even have names, but they want them to be rooted in reality. But then as the movie progresses, it's just, nope, they're just strictly the symbol.
I think his character. How do you say his name?
Javier Bardem, maybe.
Yeah, he was definitely much more fleshed out. I think that's because we know a lot about God. You know what I mean? We have a lot of like to work on with him. But Mother Nature is so ambiguous. It's not like an actual deity as much as more of an elemental force that. So I feel like maybe that could explain why Jennifer Lawrence is more of a blank slate to a degree.
So I think, in an effort to move on from this subject and also to kind of consolidate what I think our viewpoints are, is that overall the acting was pretty solid. And it really comes down to then, like, personal opinions on what these characters should have been and how they should have behaved, just kind of personal preference. But as far as the actual acting went, the actual skills of the actors, I think we could all agree that was pretty well done.
When I saw it with my dad, he said the same thing. Because my dad, I saw it with him and my cousin Landon, and my father had similar opinions to me, and he said it was the best acted terrible movie. But yeah, we can move on to another category.
Word. So next we'll talk a little bit about the setting of this movie, which takes place in a house.
Yes.
I don't know if either of you guys want to jump into that, or...
Yeah, do you want to start, Glenn, or do you want me to start again?
Why don't you start?
Okay. This I actually will say was pretty cool for what they're going for. Like, the house represents Earth. I thought that it being in the middle of nowhere kind of fit too, because you could interpret that as like space. There were definitely some scenes I thought were more clever than others. There was one in particular where there's just a heart in the toilet, and Jennifer Lawrence like pokes at it and just goes, and she's like, and like for me that scene just kind of appeared as like cheap body horror, but I could be wrong. But no, I mean, all in all, I think that the house served as a good setting for the movie, for what it was going for.
I would agree. I love the house. Mother, as we'll cover more, and how effective it was as a horror movie. It's very claustrophobic. The house just lends itself to that. When and the more there's tons of people always coming into this house, and they's inviting in, and it just becomes more and more cramped. And as someone who doesn't like parties, and someone who's an introvert, and someone who's not claustrophobic, but is in those kind of social settings, you feel it. It just adds to the whole psychedelicness of it, and the fucking with your head, and make you just like, it grates on you and makes your head hurt. At least it did mine. So I thought it was really effective.
I think I had I'll give you a chance to speak, Josh. Sorry, I'm just cutting you. I think I had I had a similar experience, but it was like a different reaction, where it was more just an endurance test. Like by the third act of the movie, when the house is just completely falling apart, and like the SWAT team's breaking in, and like there's just people getting like their heads blown off. Like this when Jennifer Lawrence's character is in labor, this police captain's like, "Ma'am, I'll help you," and then just like the next scene, his cheek gets like shot, and like his head gets blown off, and it's like like it's just, I feel like it's just meant to like shock you, like, whoa, like. And I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. Like for me personally, it just was kind of like an endurance test of like what is even happening. It's just complete chaos. But I mean, for Glenn, it sounds like it was, there was like something to be gained from it. Like it was like a psychedelic kind of experience, I guess. Like it was very like using
a bad trip.
Yeah, I definitely feel like for the most part I'm on Glenn's page. As far as Nate's last point, I'd say I definitely understand that, and one thing I kind of liked about the whole just like things started escalating so quickly, and like one moment she'd be in like one room and there's like a few crazy things happening, and then she'd walk down to the other room and there's like this war zone occurring, and it seems like 50 years has passed and it's like things have just gotten way out of hand. It kind of felt to me like what we'll get into a little later, the biblical stuff. I'm not going to say I'm familiar with the Bible very well as a whole, but I have studied Genesis a bit, for example, and I know in that book, as the stories went on, time seemed to go by like a lot quicker, and things just started seeming to happen so much faster, and so many more things were happening, and just so many more characters were being introduced so quickly, as opposed to in the beginning where you'd get to kind of like know characters a little bit better. So it in that regards, it definitely added to the parallels, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But at any rate, I liked the setting of the house, and really, as far as settings go, the only thing that I wasn't quite thrilled about were the I think there's like 2 or 3 really short scenes where we kind of get a glimpse of I think it was Javier Bardem's kind of vision or whatever, where they'd show like a big wide like nature, and it was all like kind of CGI made up, and I didn't like that. I didn't think it added anything to the film, but those were very short scenes, so that didn't really seem very detrimental to me. Moving along, I would say
just real quick. Did you guys like the scenes where Jennifer Lawrence tells people to get off the counter like 5 times?
Yes, that was fun.
Yeah,
That was fun.
I remember we were at the little theater, and every time someone would do something like ridiculous, like sitting on the unbolted sink or something like that, she'd be like, get down, and they'd say something like really snappy to her, and someone would be like, oh no, in the crowd, and we're like, yeah, we very strongly feel that too, person behind us.
That movie, like that part of the movie was like, it was weird because it was when characters were becoming less realistic, in my opinion. Like there would just be like 2 people like having sex in her bed, and she's like, you would be like, what are you doing? And she was just like, and they're like, do you mind? And it's like, you're in my house.
And then that person in the back of the theater is like, oh no.
Yeah, true. Like I feel like if it were like more realistic, that freak out where like she's like screaming at everybody would have happened a lot sooner.
Yeah.
Which I guess is supposed to be like Mother Nature puts up with a lot of stuff.
Which she does.
Yeah. Especially,
quite a lot.
It seems like a lot of it too has to do with Javier Bardem's character and all that sort of stuff. She's like, all right, I'm going to put up with it because of him. But then
she loves
at a certain point, she's like, I'm not even going to.
Which was awesome.
Or like that part where she's like telling somebody to like get off the counter. No, it was to like fix the wall. And then like as she's doing that, this like Chad walks up to her and just like, hey, can I get your number? And she's like, leave me alone. And he's like not taking a hint.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what that was a symbol of, honestly. Like, who is that guy supposed to be? Like, is he a biblical figure, or is it just like...
I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say a lot of those characters were supposed to represent, like, as far as the biblical part, and we'll get more into that later, I think they're supposed to represent kind of the descendants of Cain. From my understanding and recollection of the Bible, which is very hazy, it's been a while.
I was wondering too if like that was like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're seeing there is
but it escalated.
The kind of sinners that eventually get flooded out of the world.
It escalated quickly too. Like
Yes.
when she like told him like to get lost. This actually kind of like took me by surprise. I'm gonna use a word that I don't like to say on camera, well, at all. But he's all like, "You arrogant cunt," and it's like, dude,
Yeah.
like what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, that was.
She gets called that a lot in the movie. Like,
Yes.
I think that's also to play into like, kind of like I think it kind of like changes. It's like it's either biblical or it's like kind of a social message, like women.
It shows either like the sinners from like the biblical perspective, or just kind of like the kind of amoral people that a lot of people have kind of devolved to.
I think that towards the end of the film, we're looking at when the house is really being torn apart. We're looking at where we are now. I think, and again, we didn't actually have this on here, but like the environmental themes, you know, I think it was Nate said, Mother Nature puts up with a lot, and she really does, you know. We take and we take and we take and we take, and while we're taking, we fuck ourselves over. We have wars for resources that drain the earth and cause not only environmental problems, but problems for ourselves as a human race with, you know, it's awful. And I think maybe that's part of what the film's message is we're kind of at the breaking point in that sense, and that we need to start respecting each other and quit starting wars for oil and other natural resources and looting the earth and basically fucking shit up in general. So
I was wondering when I was gonna bring this up, but you reminded me of one part in the movie that there's one scene in particular that had me. If I were to describe the movie, it would be like just being completely lost, and then in this scene I was like able to be on the right track, and I was like, oh, okay, I see what this movie has to offer. And it was the scene where they're all grieving over the death of who I imagine is supposed to be Abel, because they do the Cain and Abel scene where Cain kills Abel with like a stapler or something. I don't remember. Some kind of, oh no, it's a doorknob.
Doorknob, yeah.
And she's like, you have no idea what it's like to be a mother. You give and you give, and it's never enough. And she's saying this to Jennifer Lawrence's character, and it's like, that was one thing where I was like, okay, that symbolism works. Like, that actually is like, it has subtlety, and it's kind of like a beautiful scene where it's like the irony doesn't dawn on Eve's character that, you know, you're preaching to the choir, I guess. Like, yeah, Mother Nature does know, because all of you moved into this house have just been nothing but a nuisance, and she's basically kept quiet and tried to just keep a level head, trying to deal with this madness. So it was kind of like, it was like a neat take on humanity. It was a neat take on, it wasn't even really biblical. Like, I mean, yeah, the two characters are of the Bible, but that never happened in Genesis. Like, there was never like Eve talked to Mother Nature about how Mother Nature doesn't understand her life or whatever. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a clever scene, and then shortly after the whole flood thing, it was, for me, it was back to just not knowing what the hell was happening.
Word. So that was the setting.
Yeah, I probably should have saved that for characters, but I was like, I should have brought that up sooner.
That's cool. It's all part of the discussion. And let's see, next we'll talk just a little bit about just technical stuff, cinematography, CGI, just things we thought about, all that sort of stuff, the music and all that stuff. I'll start off saying that I know that this film was actually shot on 16 millimeter. It's an interesting little tidbit, and I thought it looked really nice. I liked seeing the kind of the film look to it, because a lot of films nowadays, they're coming out digitally, and I don't like the look of it nearly as much as film. And I believe the reason that this film was shot in 16 millimeter had a lot to do with a lot of the different shots in the film itself, because I think again, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that since the camera's a lot smaller, it's a lot easier to do those like really close up shots that like you get of Jennifer Lawrence or something like that. So I know Aronofsky's used 16 millimeter before in the past in other films for similar reasons. So that's the kind of interesting thing to note. As far as other just like technical details, as everyone who knows me knows, I didn't like CGI stuff in it because I just don't like CGI in general.
Same.
However, like I said in our first review, I thought the nice thing about CGI here, at least, as opposed to like a lot of other movies that I've seen heavy CGI use, which it isn't heavily used in this film, but other films that have CGI that I see a lot of lately, the problem is they use them in kind of like very like important like climactic kind of scenes, or scenes that like are supposed to make you feel a strong feeling.
Or that could have been done practically.
Yeah, especially if they could have been done practically, but like you'll see them in those scenes that are just supposed to like really elicit something strong from you, and it just completely kills it because it looks so like fake. It looks like it's from a video game. Fortunately, this movie didn't use CGI too terribly much in important areas, so that was good at least.
What's ironic with what you said is, I think CGI came about as a response to people wanting something to look more realistic.
Yeah.
And it's like now people are going back to practical effects. Like they want, puppets, and they want like real settings, and like, just painted, like set like I don't know what it's called, like 3D painting backgrounds.
I did think I wasn't crazy about the CGI either, and I do think they could have done things they did with it practical, but it would have been hard. And I really didn't mind it because the scenes, like I'm thinking of when she's like all crispy and it's more ethereal, and unreal. So in that sense, it kind of works. The CGI doesn't look so real. And we mentioned the music, right? So the score, I thought it worked. And I thought the way it was shot really worked. I liked that it could be so intimate and so close. It wasn't removed at all. It was right in there. And again, it added to that whole claustrophobicness and uncomfortableness of the viewing experience.
Yeah, oddly enough, I don't really remember too much about the soundtrack. I don't remember having a problem with it, but I'll just take your word for it that it complemented the scenes and just what they were going for with like it being claustrophobic.
Yeah, I feel like I as well don't have any like vivid recollection of anything that was in the soundtrack or anything like that, but it does remind me of a quote that I think Louis Buñuel said once. I don't remember the exact of the quote, but it said something like essentially he was saying that like a good soundtrack is really memorable, but a great soundtrack just blends right in to the movie. Like you don't remember, there's that soundtrack because you're just you're so immersed in the movie as the whole. It's you don't think, that soundtrack, that was good, because then maybe the other parts weren't as good, so you were jamming to the soundtrack instead.
That's usually the first thing I go to in movies. I love like what soundtracks they go with, especially if it's like original compositions.
Yeah. So yeah, those were I think we're more or less on the same page as far as that stuff goes. Now, this was obviously, some people contend whether this was a horror movie or a thriller movie or whatever, but it falls kind of into the horror genre. No matter how you look at it, it's got the elements there. So we figured we'd talk about what was scary or horrifying, if anything, and just what we felt about that aspect of the film. So I think, Glenn, you probably have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. Besides the claustrophobicness of the film and the psychedelicness, it was also, as indicated, quite graphic, and I think it was used effectively. I think it was used where it mattered. I don't think they could have not done that baby scene.
Yeah.
They had to have done that scene, and they did it well. It wasn't exploitive. It wasn't over the. It was over the top, but not over the top. It was a very quick shot of the carcass. It was back. Very quick shots of the things that are very graphic. It's not. They don't linger. They're not there to gross you. They're there to gross you up, but they're more. They don't. They're not like a Herschel Gordon Lewis film where it just buckets and buckets and buckets of blood, and it just lingers over these gratuitous scenes and leers and kind of drains them, arguably, of their effectiveness. I mean, depending. I think it was used well. It was used sparingly enough, and I enjoyed it. Oh, and I also love Herschel Gordon Lewis films. Don't get me wrong. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, I think it was definitely the horror aspects were used effectively. You have a lot of sort of psychological horror through a lot of the film, on Jennifer Lawrence's behalf. Just what's gonna happen next, what's going on with her bodily, because she's got all sorts of these weird medical problems, but on top of that there are these people that are just showing up and you don't know what's gonna happen next. What are they gonna do to her? What's gonna happen to
there's a lot of
everything and everyone?
I think the fact that an element of the unknown is, as H.P. Lovecraft said, I think I'm probably paraphrasing, but the strongest and oldest fear of man. That like any horror film, that's a big thing here. We don't know what those people are doing. We don't know exactly what's always going on. And while some people might find that infuriating or annoying or pointless, others will find it takeaway as scary and disorienting. And
Yeah, but the horror at the end, the baby scene, is not over the top. It serves its purpose, which basically is kind of Aronofsky's opinion, his portrayal of the religion, and specifically the whole like sacrificial aspect of the religion. Whether or not you agree with him, that was what I kind of took away was the purpose, and I believe it was executed effectively.
Yes.
So again, irregardless of what you think or feel or believe, that was I believe, intended purpose of that, and it seemed like it was done very well.
That was actually the scene where something about it didn't click with me, and I'm trying to figure out the words of why. It was I mean, I do think when they're carrying the baby, it's a little bit like over the top with like the baby like peeing as they're carrying it, which I understand. It's like the baby's in shock, so it's just scared. But the scenes happen so fast that like the baby like is born, and then just like immediately it's like they want to see him, and then it's like the care of the baby, and they're careless, and the baby breaks its neck, and Jennifer Lawrence is like, "No, my baby!" Like that's another thing too. Like she doesn't really get Like, she has, like, her freak out in the end when they see what they're doing to the baby. But, I don't know, like, I feel like it would have happened sooner. Like, I don't know, maybe it's not fair to say, but, like, she would have done something sooner. She would have been like, no, give me that. Like, I know she was, like, caught behind, but, like, it kind of seemed like she was sort of a little passive. Like, hey, no, my baby, no. But, I feel like with the Bible, like, what makes the story of Jesus' sacrifice stand out is the fact that Jesus grew up to be, I think, like 30 or something. And, you know, he got to do, like, all these miracles, and he got to do all these things for mankind. And what's so tragic is that he did all of this, and the Romans still found him and crucified him. And, whereas in the movie, there's really no connection to the baby because it happens so quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when the baby dies, the only emotion you have is, like, of shock that they would show the baby being eaten by the people. And I do understand, too, that the baby is supposed to be, like, the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. And it's showing, like, people are indulging in these things, and it's trying to show it in, like, a morbid light.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know, maybe to me it just kind of felt like unfair a little bit. Like, I do respect having your interpretation of it, but it did seem like there was kind of like a stab, like a little jab or something. I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into it. What do you guys think?
I think there was a stab, but I think that's that's his perspective. You know, there's an intended message to be gotten, his message, his view on it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, and I also think there's more to the baby, which I'm gonna hold off and get into that a little bit more when we get into some of the different aspects of the plot. So let's dive right into that now.
Yeah.
Now we have like a bunch of different aspects of the plot that we kind of picked apart a little bit. We have we already pretty much, I think, pretty well covered the surface level of the plot. And we've also talked quite a bit about the biblical level, but is there anything else that you guys would like to kind of comment on as far as the biblical aspects of Mother?
Let me think. I mean, I definitely fall into the category of people who think that a lot of the biblical symbolism is, like, very on the nose. There's not a lot of subtlety there. Like, it's based, like, and you were saying, Josh, that there's actually, like, people who didn't pick up on it when they were watching the movie.
Yeah, there's actually while we were at the theater, the people behind us were like asking, did you figure out anything? What was going on in that movie? And I'm just thinking to myself,
I think it was on the nose, and I think that's more comes to personal taste. Like, what makes me think of, like, that it's a jab, it's like punk music. Punk music is on the nose. Punk music generally doesn't use metaphors or beat around the bush. It says, this is what we don't like, this is the way we see it, and they kind of stick in it, and then they, you know, and so yeah, I think that's, I keep losing my train of thought.
I think it was very in your face as well, but there was a lot more, and I think the problem with Mother, as far as the crowd that was turned off by that, is that it's the biblical level of this film's plot is so right there in your face that if you do pick up on it, which apparently not everyone did, but if you do pick up on it, it's so obvious that it kind of draws you to focus on that
rather than the other thing.
Yeah, so you might not be like looking into what else does this film mean, because you feel like you figured out, this film is a movie about these people in a house and they're all representing biblical figures. But I believe there's a lot more to it, so we'll get into that a little bit as well.
that's where I would have liked the subtlety to come in. Like,
Yeah.
they could have played their characters, but you could also see if you were looking hard enough, like, oh, okay, he's supposed to be that person, she's supposed to be that person.
Yeah.
Where instead I felt like it was too much at the forefront, so it was just hard to look past that to see their characters. It basically just felt like they were playing. I mean, it felt kind of like a puppet show. Like, this is where this thing comes in, this is where that comes in, and it didn't actually feel like they were the characters that they started out as. Where Javier Bardem, like I was saying earlier, was like a writer, and Jennifer Lawrence is his wife, and they're, you know, just living in the countryside, trying to start a family, trying to build up this house from scratch, sort of.
Yeah, I definitely see that point. And I also lost my train of thought. This has been quite a long video.
It's good though. Like, I personally appreciate the back and forth. Like, I appreciate that, you know, we're able to get all of our points of views out on the table, literally.
Yes.
You're gonna tell us the other things that you personally saw.
Yeah, so I think that what I was gonna say is that from if I was a filmmaker, for instance, from that perspective and thinking about my audience, I don't know if I would have taken such a in your face using the biblical stuff so in your face, because it just seems so shoved in your face. But for me, it worked really well, and we'll get in. We'll talk a little bit about. We'll talk about the kind of other connections that I made. Now, I did some research and stuff, so it's not like I didn't have some sort of epiphany. But from different things that I've read, different people's opinions, I kind of agree with a lot of people who feel that this film is almost not a story about the Bible per se, but a story about a writer who is seeing his role and the roles of different people in his life through a biblical perspective. So, for instance, you've got Javier Bardem's character who is God, but he's a writer.
And that would have been cool to just add to that, but that's where I go back to my issues, where it's like that would have been really cool if he was seeing himself it'd be almost like a narcissism angle. He thinks he's God, and the people in his life are kind of like the characters in the story.
Yeah.
But the only issue that I have is that it goes to them being symbols too much.
Yeah.
To where you kind of lose the humanity of the characters and the realism of why are these people showing up in his house randomly. It starts out pretty realistic, the older guy who's supposed to be Adam's hey, I'm just in the neighborhood. But it just gets more and more abstract, where people are just busting in.
And arguably though, I mean, it's not, thinking of yourself that way, if that is the case, is not anything. Is it far from realistic? It's far from rational or logical. I mean, it's and so maybe you could argue that it's his psychosis advancing.
Sure. I can see that.
Yeah, I had a few more points that I think I made. Was that so you got Javier Bardem's character who is God, but he's also the writer, and I feel Aronofsky might have felt of himself as this character in some way. Obviously, I'm hoping that he's not as narcissistic to think of himself as a god, but I feel as a creator you kind of sometimes think of yourself as this like you are a creator. You're
Right.
making things.
Creating worlds. You know, you're creating events, creating people,
Mm.
characters.
And then Lawrence's character plays not only Mother Earth, but like just a romantic interest that gets treated like Mother Earth, which kind of ties then into the whole environmental aspect where she kind of gets shit upon.
Jennifer Lawrence definitely takes on the brunt of different things to portray in this movie.
Mm.
Like, she obviously is Mother Nature. I think she's a little bit of Mary. I think she's also like kind of like an embodiment of women's suffrage in some parts.
She's a lot of things, which again maybe could explain why. Again, we were going back to why there isn't much to her character. Like, she's so blank. She's so, you know, she's many things.
Mm. And I just to kind of finish up with the whole connection to being a creator and the metaphors there. Even when you get to the end with the baby, that was kind of almost symbolic of how I imagine maybe Aronofsky feels about how his own works are received. Like, he's got this this group of people who are just like clamoring to get his art, but when he gives it out to them, they kind of mutilate it and mindlessly consume it, and they interpret it in all these like just so surface level ways. And I feel like that's really one of the, I think, deepest things I took away from the film as a whole. But I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, that does sound interesting, like that premise.
I feel like if that was the case, then it shows. It's kind of like a middle finger to all of people, myself included, who instantly just saw only the biblical things, like from the beginning, you know, who didn't dig deeper, you know.
But that does, like, at one point, because you are asking, like, I think as a director, you gotta ask yourself, how hard can I make the audience work before they just get fed up with it? Like, I think you gotta give the audience a little bit. Like, when you're just like, hey, figure it out, like, the audience is gonna be like, screw this, like, I'm just gonna tune out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess a lot of it too is like, who's your audience?
This film is very. It's an art. Me and Josh were talking about this. It's an art house film, but that's being played not only in art houses but mainstream theaters.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. It's not exactly a mainstream movie. It's not a blockbuster. It's not a popcorn. It's not popcorn fare.
No.
Which could also maybe be why it's so controversial. If it was. Because it's being shown to a larger audience who normally wouldn't go to see, or who are in the practice of analyzing or viewing such a difficult piece of work. So that maybe accounts for.
But they're definitely used to seeing a Jennifer Lawrence movie, so they'll definitely go to the new Jennifer Lawrence movie.
Yeah, true.
And walk out very confused and uncomfortable. So I can see why this movie has received a lot of like confusion and its fair share of negativity, not only from people who are looking more deeply into it, but just the general public as a whole. So I understand that aspect, and I think we've covered most everything that we set out to cover. There were a few other things, just little tidbits that I noticed throughout this film that I don't really know what they mean, but they're interesting to note, and a lot of it had to do with other like religious allusions. for instance, there's like almost an allusion to reincarnation, which we see at the end of the film.
Yeah, true. That's definitely interesting how it just kind of like starts from the beginning, but it's like a different woman instead of Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah, it's
Which we were saying was kind of like how it's theorized, maybe how the Big Bang works. You know, the Big Bang happened, and a world, you know, is created, or maybe not quite, we don't know. And then eventually, and then again, and boom, boom, and it just keeps happening and happening and happening. And it's kind of, yeah.
And another interesting thing that I kind of found while doing my web searches was the symbol on the lighter that keeps popping up throughout the film is actually I believe a Germanic rune called a Wendehorn, I think, something to that extent. And it represents several things, represents life and death, represents man and woman. I don't know the significance of the inclusion in the film. If anyone does, please let us know, because that I don't know, other than like it just like referring to maybe some of the characters or some of the things that happen in the film, but I don't know if there's any like deeper meaning. But I'm trying to think. I feel like there's one other religious thing that I picked up on that wasn't biblical. I don't know if either of you picked up on any.
Let me think. I mean, I think I mentioned this before, I thought that with Eve, kind of like how Jennifer Lawrence was like a culmination of different entities, I thought that Eve was sort of a combination of that character and also the serpent, who in the Bible is who coerces Eve to bite the apple, and then get Adam to bite the apple, and then that's how it all unfolds. Because they made Eve in this movie very like manipulative and just kind of have like a very like, I don't know, very mischievous like personality.
I feel like,
and I feel like in the, not to cut you off, but I feel like in the Bible Eve was just as like ignorant as, well, not ignorant, but like just as innocent as Adam, like just very like didn't know anything about the outside world, kept very just in this enclosed place. And then the serpent's like, don't you want to learn about how to be like God and learn about like the secrets of life? And like I feel like honestly in the Bible it's more interesting in this part, like the apple is like the fruit of knowledge, and in the movie it's just like this glass piece of crystal that he's like something that he salvaged from a fire, and then it just breaks. Like it's not like they don't learn anything like in the Bible. There's no like profound like learning of the consequences of life and death and like the harsh realities of life. It's just, oh, you broke it, that was important to me, get out of my office, and then he like boards it up so they never come in again. So I feel like in the movie it was just kind of like an abridged, it was more abridged, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say I agree to an extent with your kind of analysis of the Eve character in this film. Although I do think also, much like a lot of the other characters in this film, Eve's portrayal in the film is sort of Darren Aronofsky's interpretation of the Bible's depiction of Eve, which is sort of like this sort of almost like manipulative and
she used
like,
her womanly ways to,
which is not to make the point clear, it's not his point of view, it's his view of how the Bible
they do say
sees it.
That's why Christians are like usually sexist, like generally speaking, is because they're like, oh, Eve bit the apple and tricked Adam. So.
So in that way it worked. I think one of the other things that was not strictly like a biblical thing was the Mother Nature. Although nature is...
It's almost pagan.
Yeah.
The goddess.
Yeah. Nature itself is created in the Bible, but there is no like entity, Mother Nature, really. I mean, maybe some sort of like mysticism version of Christianity or something like that, but just like the Bible as it's generally understood doesn't really have that as an entity. So that's another thing. I think this video is probably really long, and I hope that's still recording because I haven't checked. But if it is, thank you so much for sticking with us through this whole thing, listening to us ramble. We love to hear your thoughts on this film. It was very interesting for us to watch. I think even though you